Welcome to Chapter 5 of the Washington State Beekeepers Association Apprenticeship Beekeeping course. In this chapter, we'll take a look at diseases and pests. While many beekeepers start keeping bees as a hobby, or to pollinate their garden and trees, or to simply get honey, they quickly find out that there is more to keeping bees than they ever imagined. This is because colonies are becoming susceptible to diseases and pests, and the beekeeper plays an important part in the honeybee's survival. The most important thing that a beekeeper can do when dealing with diseases and pests is to understand integrated pest management. Integrated pest management is not a process limited to the proper use of chemicals to control pests. Rather, it is the beekeeper's sole obligation to establish methods that provide responsible solutions for protecting each other, the environment, and our interests, the honeybee. While a beekeeper might think that addressing a threat to a colony means treating with chemicals, they fail to understand what integrated pest management really is. Integrated pest management starts with addressing the appropriate action to identify the real problem. In other words, the Varroa mites infesting a hive is not the problem. The problem is that the beekeepers are uneducated about this pest, and by being misinformed in their endeavors, they do more harm than good, resulting in the loss of hives. The answer may not be to eradicate the mite at the risk of damaging our environment, but to decrease the risk factors by taking actions to reduce the number of mites that we have in our hives by means of controls, brood breaks, and other non-chemical methods. However, this process does not only apply to the Varroa mites, but to any other pest that poses a threat to the colonies as well. In short, as a community of beekeepers, we must establish best beekeeping practices to reduce the negative impact on our colonies and the environment. In the first section, we will learn about the most common pests that we have in our areas and how they affect the bees, colonies, and hive equipment. We will also give the beekeepers some remedies and treatments to deal with them. Varroa mites are currently considered to be the most severe threat to maintaining a healthy, successful colony. Resembling a small reddish tick, Varroa mites are about the size of a pinhead and are visible to the naked eye. While there are many species of Varroa destructor has been found to be the most problematic for beekeepers. Like a tick, adult female mites attach to the bee and feed on its fat tissues. Female Varroa mites target fifth instar larvae, a phase between the two periods of molting and the development of the larva, right before the cell is capped. Mites know the correct time because the honeybee larva releases a pheromone which the Varroa mite uses to determine when to enter the cell. There are several methods that can be used to test for the presence of Varroa mites besides a mere visual inspection. The following are a list in increasing orders of reliability. The sticky board is the easiest but least reliable method for testing for Varroa mite infestation. This involves sliding a white sheet of heavy paper, metal, or plastic covered with a sticky coating such as cooking oil in the slot provided in the screen bottom board or in the front of a hive. The sheet is left in a hive for 1 week and then removed, and the number of mites that have fallen from the hive onto the sticky board are counted. You simply divide the number of mites by the number of days the board has been in the hive, and it gives you the average of mites per day. The guideline recommended for determining if there is a problem is 0 to 25 mites. It is believed that this number of mites, the bees can take care of the infestation. However, 26 or more indicates that a treatment is needed. The powdered sugar shake method is more accurate than using the sticky board. To perform this method, you use a glass jar with the lid made with the screen large enough to allow the mice to fall through, but not the bees. You then want to select a frame filled with capped and uncapped brood, ensuring that the queen is not on the frame. You then want to shake the bees from the frame into a large tub or pan. The filled bees will immediately fly away, leaving the nurse bees. These are the bees that you want to test anyway. Then you want to scoop approximately a half a cup of bees, which is about 300, from the container and place them in the jar. You then want to screw the lid in place and add enough powdered sugar, which is about 3 to 4 tablespoons, to cover the bees. You then shake the jar for approximately 1 to 2 minutes until all the bees are covered with sugar. Ensure that while shaking the jar, you place something over the top, not to allow the mites and the sugar to come out. After shaking the jar, you want to allow it to rest for a few minutes so that the mites can drop off of the bees. After that, you want to then shake the sugar through the screen onto a white sheet of paper or on the bottom of a light colored pan or a tub used to collect the mites. If there are 7 or more mites visible in the powdered sugar, a treatment should be given. The liquid detergent method uses the same steps as the powdered sugar shake, except you fill the jar halfway with water using a teaspoon of granulated automatic dishwashing detergent instead of liquid hand soap or dish soap because they make too much foam. A strong solution works better than a weak one. Then you want to shake the jar vigorously for 1 to 2 minutes. Pour the liquid through a fine screen such as a reusable coffee or tea filter and continue this process until no more mites appear. If there are more than 7 mites, a treatment should be given. The ether roll method uses the same steps as the powdered sugar shake, except the bees used for this test will be killed. However, this method may be more effective since all the mites should drop off the bees, providing a more accurate count. You will follow the same steps as in the sugar roll method, but instead of using powdered sugar, you will use 1 tablespoon of ether or spray automotive starting fluid into a jar for 2 to 3 seconds. You will then shake the bees for about 1 minute, then roll the jar for approximately 30 seconds. The mites will stick to the side of the jar. If there are 7 or more mites, a treatment should be given. For an alcohol wash, use 70% alcohol. Rubbing alcohol is fine. Collect approximately 300 nurse bees using the same techniques as the powdered sugar method described above. Nurse bees left in the tub should be poured into a cup with a screen on the bottom. Place the cup into another cup that is 3/4 full of alcohol. There are commercially available mite wash containers available in bee supply catalogs if you do not want to make your own. Beekeepers frequently use Varroa to avoid colony death. Varroa must be toxic to the mites while remaining minimally harmful to the bees, which is a challenge given the sensitivity of honeybees to many types of chemicals. Best results are attained when a colony is treated during a brood-free period, such as when installing a package and when a hive is swarming and all the colonies in surrounding areas are treated simultaneously to reduce the chances of reinfestation. With the use of most chemical treatments, some amount of the chemical is transferred to the beeswax by the bees and by direct contact, leaving a residue in the wax cell. Nectar placed in the wax cells absorbs some of the chemical residue from the wax. The result is that honey destined for human consumption may become contaminated with chemicals. It is important to understand the products that you decide to use and to develop a hive management system that will minimize contamination of comb used for the production of honey. Always follow the instructions. In this section, we will look at three categories of Varroa, which are synthetic and natural products, as well as organic acid pesticides, and how they affect the colonies. While there are a variety of synthetic Varroa on the market today approved by the EPA, like aspartame, Checkmate Plus, and Apivar, these treatments must be rotated with other types of treatment as they lose their effectiveness as mites become resistant to them. These synthetic treatments also leave a large amount of chemical residue in the wax. Natural products like essential oils, Alpalife Var, and Apigar have become more popular than its synthetic Varroa counterparts and need no extensive testing by the EPA because they are common food additives safe for human consumption. However, thymol and menthol are not safe for honeybees when used in large amounts. These compounds derived from plants are broad-spectrum pesticides. Plants-derived thymol and menthol essential oils are respectively used for control of Varroa and Tracheal Mites. Also, essential oil treatments are only effective in a narrow environment window, usually temperature-based. Outside of these conditions, they are not effective. The third Varroa that we will cover is organic acid pesticides. There are two organic acids, formic acid and oxalic acid, which are already present in honey. Formic acid is registered in the United States under the trademark name Mite 2 Quick Strips and Formic Pro. There are some concerns that formic acid may cause harm to honeybees by reducing the worker's lifespan and injuring the brood. Supporters of formic acid says that the harm is usually the result of not following the instructions. As with any pesticide, read and follow instructions to minimize harm and maximize effectiveness. Hopguard 2 is also a natural acid from the resins of hops and can be an effective mite treatment. Oxalic acid is registered in the U.S. under the chemical name oxalic acid dihydrate. It also is approved for use as a dribble treatment for Varroa mites in 2015. It is a natural treatment, and certified natural grown beekeeping allows its use in the treatment of Varroa mites. Oxalic acid requires direct contact with the mites to be effective and does not affect the mites that are in the cell brood. If there is cell brood in the colony, the treatment will need to be given 3 times regardless of the method applied, once every 5 to 7 days to ensure that all bees are exposed. The tracheal mite, Acarpus woody, cannot be seen with the naked eye. The tracheal mite feeds and reproduces in the trachea or the respiratory passage of the adult honeybee and reduces the lifespan of the individual bee. The tracheal mite infestation is most devastating to the honeybee colony in the fall. Individual bees reared in late fall, known as winter bees, normally live through the winter months and are essential to begin the brood rearing and foraging cycle of the colony in the spring. When the lifespan of the winter bees is reduced by tracheal mite infestation, colonies often die late winter due to the lack of bees to maintain a cluster. Beekeepers tend to find a dead or very weak colony in the spring, with plentiful amount of honey remaining in the hive. The tracheal mite parasites cannot exist for more than a few hours off the adult honeybee. Therefore, it must rely on a carrier host to spread from one colony to the next. The intercolony movement of the parasite occurs through robbing and drifting of the individual workers and drones. No one symptom or sign characterizes a tracheal mite infestation, and, as mentioned earlier, positive diagnosis can only be made by a microscopic examination of the trach. Grease patties are used to help control tracheal mites, and Mite Away 2 quick strips is registered for tracheal mite control as well as Varroa mite control with the active ingredients of formic acid. In the first section, we will learn about the most common pests that we have in our areas and how they affect the bees, colonies, and hive equipment. We will also give the beekeepers some remedies and treatments to deal with them. Next, we'll look at the wax moth. While wax moths don't attack bees directly, their larva feeds on the comb and prefer the cells with the pollen used to feed the brood. Healthy hives will take care of themselves, but hives that have been abandoned or improperly stored frames are the target of the wax moth. Depending on how messy the frames are, you can clean them off prior to placing them back into the hive or allow the bees to clean them out in the spring. Next, we'll look at the ant. While ants are small, a nest can overtake a weak hive. The best practice when placing a hive is to ensure that they are not located near an established ant nest. Natural methods including the use of petroleum jelly on the base or the legs, wood ashes, diametric earth, cinnamon, red pepper around the hive can be used to defend against ants. These can work if the ant nest is not already well established and hasn't already found a hive. It may be necessary to use an ant termite bait such as fipronil buried inside the ant nest. The bottom right photo shows the use of wood ashes around an infected hive. In this section, we'll take a look at the yellow jacket, the bald-faced hornet, and the Asian giant hornet and see how much destruction they can cause in a hive. Yellow jackets are wasps and are the other predators of the honeybee. They build paper nests in the ground that can be very large, defensive, and aggressive. The photo on the left shows a honeybee guarding the entrance, a dead yellow jacket at the hive entrance, with others waiting to go in. The photo at the bottom right shows dead bees on the ground in front of the hive with yellow jackets feeding. Yellow jackets can be a natural recycling agent for dead bees that are hauled out of the hive, and you will often see a few of them on the ground under the entrance of the hive. This relationship is beneficial. However, in the late summer, early fall, they are looking for much protein as they possibly can feed their brood and will take over even the strongest hive relatively quickly. The photo at the top right shows the entrance to a nest under a rock. The nest is much larger than what can be seen. It is well camouflaged, and any disturbance near the nest will cause a massive attack. The bald-faced hornet's nests are shaped like large footballs made of paper from wood fiber. They are famous for their massive enclosed nests, which can be seen hanging from tree branches or other sturdy perches. The inside of the nest has horizontal layers of paper cells for brood and can number in the thousands. Described as one of the most intimidating insects in the world, this non-native hornet was found for the first time in British Columbia, Canada, and in the northwest corner of Washington state in the fall of 2019. It poses a significant threat to the honeybees. It is the world's largest species of honeys, and it will adapt to the conditions in the Pacific Northwest. A group of 15 to 30 of the Asian giant hornets can completely overrun a strong colony of 30,000 to 50,000 honeybees within a few hours. Described as one of the most intimidating insects in the world, this non-native hornet was found for the first time in British Columbia, Canada, and in the northwest corner of Washington state in the fall of 2019. It poses a significant threat to the honeybees. It is the world's largest species of honeys, and it will adapt to the conditions in the Pacific Northwest. A group of 15 to 30 of the Asian giant hornets can completely overrun a strong colony of 30,000 to 50,000 honeybees within a few hours. Next, we'll look at prevention. If you set traps in early spring, the month of March, you can trap yellow jacket queens. You can use a 50-50 mixture of apple juice and water as bait in any kind of container that will allow the yellow jacket or bald-faced hornet to enter but not exit. Since they are able to fly in cooler weather than bees, if you can trap an overwinter queen, you will destroy a potential nest. The yellow jackets in this container were caught in a 24-hour period in early September using apple juice and water as bait. The bottom section of the trap has canned cat food laced with fipronil. The entrance-exit holes in the bottom are large enough that the wasps can enter and leave with the bait. In this case, you want them to take it back to their nest and feed it to their young in order to destroy the whole nest. In the photo, we see a pile of dead bees. This is a classic case of poisoning. To prevent this, talk to your neighbors about where your bees are located and not to spray when your bees are flying or on days when the wind will carry the spray toward your hives. As beekeepers, we must educate those around us on how they may be affecting the bees without even knowing. It is a good practice to keep those around you informed. Let's take a look at some hive diseases. While not common in the Pacific Northwest, these beetles have been moving further north and west for several years. Been discovered in British Columbia in 2015, so it is important to be aware of them, especially if purchasing nukes from a warmer area. There is increased talk about the so-called zombie flies or zombies. Since 2008, with their confirmed discovery in the United States, the fly has spread to the East Coast, and there are confirmed cases in California, Oregon, New York, and Virginia. The small fly lays its eggs in the abdomen of the bee. The eggs hatch and the larva eats the bees from the inside, obviously killing it in the process. Next, we'll look at the wax moth. While wax moths don't attack bees directly, their larva feeds on the comb and prefer the cells with the pollen used to feed the brood. Healthy hives will take care of themselves, but hives that have been abandoned or improperly stored frames are the target of the wax moth. Depending on how messy the frames are, you can clean them off prior to placing them back into the hive or allow the bees to clean them out in the spring. Mice can damage a hive. Not only do they build nests and raise their young in an accessible hive, but they also eat the wax and stores. The best prevention for mice is to use an entrance restrictor in the fall. If you have skunks or raccoons in your area, you will need to raise your hive at least 12 inches off the ground to deter them from disturbing your hive. This will expose their underbelly to bee stings. However, when dealing with badgers, not only should you use a platform and raise your hive off the ground, but you should also secure your hive to the stand, as the badger will knock it over. For bees, you can build a special platform as seen in the picture to the right, or you can use the 700-volt electrical fence to deter them. Let's take a look at a few other brood diseases and their treatments. European Foulbrood is a non-spores forming bacteria disease caused by pathogens. Often confused with American Foulbrood, European Foulbrood is quite different with different symptoms. And in order to correctly identify them, it is critical that you are aware of their symptoms. European Foulbrood fails the American Foulbrood rope test. That is, when placing a toothpick in the cell and pulling it out, you will not get that rope. That is because the larva will be coiled and twisted in the cell. It will have a yellow streak on the larva, which will become brown over time. There will be a sour, decayed odor different from a distinctive American Foulbrood odor. The dead pupa will not have its tongue present. European Foulbrood is a treatable brood disease and can be treated with terramycin, which can be obtained from a qualified veterinarian. However, it can also be treated using natural means like breaking brood cycles. Requeening is an effective part of the integrated pest management practice, as well as feeding with sugar syrup, which can help the colony overcome the disease. American Foulbrood is the most serious brood disease for beekeepers worldwide, caused by bacteria which can produce over 1 billion spurs per infected larva. These spurs are injected by larvae up to 3 days old, germinating in the gut of a young larva, but do not germinate in the larvae that are older than 3 days. Larvae less than 24 hours old are the most susceptible to infection. Some of the symptoms are as listed below. Irregular brood patterns, shotgun appearance, with many open cells among capped brood. Perforated or sunken concave capped cells, often greasy looking. The larva will have a sticky appearance, not white and shiny. The dead larva ropes out and snaps back. That's the ropey test. Dehydrated scales tightly adhere to the cells, the lower cell wall. There would be a distinctive odor, a glue pot or a decomposition type smell, and the pupil's tongue will be sticking out of its mouth. If American Foulbrood is detected in the hive, the honey can be consumed by humans, but the hive is highly contagious and can easily spread to other colonies within the apiary. While there is no known treatment to date, terramycin and toluene has been used as a control. However, if a hive is infected with American Foulbrood disease, it is subject to U.S. law that hive is burned and the bees are destroyed. This measure is taken because American Foulbrood spores can remain active for up to 70 years in the hive equipment alone. The next brood disease we'll look at is Chalkbrood. It is caused by a fungus. The symptoms are dead larva that turns white at first and then black. You may also see them being cleaned out of the front of the hive. Chalkbrood usually clears up by itself in the summer heat. The best practice for preventing Chalkbrood is to replace brood frames every 3 to 5 years. The most common hive disease is Nosema, which affects the gut of the honeybees. There are two types of Nosema: Nosema cerani, which can affect the hive at any time of the year, and Nosema apis, which is the most problematic in the winter and spring, which you will be able to identify by the fecal droppings on the inside and outside of the box. However, there is a treatment for Nosema called Fumidil B, which replaced Fumagellin a few years ago, and it works very well as a treatment for Nosema apis, but not so well for Nosema cerani. This concludes Chapter 5 of the Washington State Beekeepers Association Apprentice Course. Please complete all assigned reading and videos for this chapter, as well as joining me for a 1-hour chapter review at the appointed date and time.